He gave her his last treat. She never forgot him. War had ruined everything. The skies were dark with smoke. Buildings were broken. Fires burned in every street. The air smelled like metal, ash, and fear. Private Mason Cole walked alone through the ruined city. His boots crunched over glass and metal. He held his rifle close, even though there were no more enemies around. At least he hoped so. His unit was gone. Everyone else had died 2 days ago when the enemy airstrike hit their shelter. Mason had survived by crawling into a drainage pipe. He had been walking ever since. His food was gone. His water was gone. His body ached, and his head pounded from thirst. But worse than anything was the silence. This city had once been alive. Now it was a grave. As he turned a corner, he saw a broken store. Its windows were smashed. Its sign hung from one chain. Inside, it looked empty-looted by survivors or maybe soldiers. But something caught his eye. A vending machine. It stood in the corner, dusty and cracked. The glass was still intact, but it had spiderweb lines like it had been hit hard, and inside there was one thing left. A chocolate bar. Mason's eyes widened. He moved quickly, kicking aside fallen shelves and broken glass. He stood in front of the machine like it was a treasure chest. He pressed the button. Nothing. He hit it with his fist. Still nothing. Then, with a deep breath, he stepped back and kicked it hard. Once, twice, a third time. With a loud crack, the glass shattered and the bar fell to the bottom. He reached in and pulled it out. The wrapper was dirty, but it was still sealed. Still good. Mason sat down on the cold floor. He stared at the chocolate in his hands. It was the last sweet thing left in this world. Then he heard a sound, a small sound, like breathing. He froze. Slowly, he turned his head behind the shelf. Under the shadows, something moved. He raised his rifle, heart racing, but then he saw her, a girl no older than 10, small, thin, with purple skin and silver eyes, an alien child. Her hair was messy, her arms full of dirt. She wore no shoes. She stared at him. He stared back. Mason slowly lowered his gun. He said softly. She didn't speak. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his last water bottle, empty. Then he looked at the chocolate in his hand. His stomach growled. But he looked at her again. Her lips were cracked. Her eyes were wide with fear and hunger. He tore the wrapper slowly and broke the bar in half. Then, with slow hands, he placed the bigger half on the ground and pushed it toward her. She didn't move. "It's okay," Mason whispered. "It's yours." She crawled forward, grabbed it, and ran back behind the shelf like a wild animal. But after a moment, she peeked back out. Mason smiled and took a small bite from his half. "See, safe." The girl watched him closely. Then, slowly, she sat down where she was. Her small hands unwrapped the bar with care. She took one small bite, then another. Tears formed in her silver eyes. Mason's chest felt tight. He didn't know what species she was, didn't know her name, but he could see it in her face. She had lost everything too. The world outside was still broken, but here, in this dark store, 2 survivors shared a piece of chocolate. Then silence broke again, a low hum. Mason's head snapped up. Enemy drones. He jumped to his feet, grabbed the girl's hand, and pulled her toward a back room. "Come on." They ran through fallen shelves and into a storage area. Mason pushed her behind some boxes and covered her with a dirty tarp. He looked into her eyes. "Stay. Don't move. Don't speak." She nodded, eyes wide. Mason ran back into the store and grabbed his rifle. He aimed at the sky. The drone passed overhead, but didn't see him. It moved on. Silence returned. He turned to check on the girl, but she was gone. He searched the store, called out softly. Nothing. Just like that, she had disappeared like a shadow in the smoke. Mason stood still. In his hand, the wrapper from the chocolate bar flapped gently in the wind. He never knew her name. He didn't know if she lived or died, but somewhere deep inside, He hoped she survived, because in a world full of death, he had given someone a moment of sweetness, and someone had remembered. She had no name, no record. But she was rising. The Galactic Council was worried, not because of war, not because of politics, but because of whispers, strange, quiet whispers coming from the outer colonies, small planets where no one important ever looked. These places were forgotten, poor, weak, and now they were changing. The Zarn Empire had ruled them for decades with fear and violence. Now the Zarn were gone, not defeated. It's not killed in battle. They had simply vanished. Whole bases left empty. Troops gone, ships abandoned, and in their place, only strange symbols carved into the walls and floors. A single phrase spoken by the people over and over, she remembers. No one knew what it meant, but then a new rumor began to spread about a figure seen during the night. Not human, it's not Zarn, not any known race. She was tall, moved without sound, and wore no armor or weapons. Her voice was soft. Her eyes glowed. Silver, the people who saw her called her the Ghost Empress. But when Galactic Intelligence checked their databases, they found nothing. No match. No birth records. No species. Nothing. They searched harder. Still nothing. It was impossible. Every living creature in the galaxy was registered at birth even. Orphans and clones. But this girl, this woman had never existed. Yet she was there. Liberating worlds. Leading secret armies made of ex-slaves, forgotten children, and survivors of old wars. And in every liberated city, she left one thing behind, a broken vending machine. No one understood why. In a dark chamber of the High Council, leaders of 12 species sat around a round table. Their faces were pale. Their claws and tendrils tapped nervously on the metal. Surface, who is she? Asked the Alari ambassador. A myth, growled the Zarn war general. A trick. One person cannot do all this. Then explain why 5 of your planets are now under her control, said the Kren speaker. The Zarn fell silent. The human ambassador, an old woman with sharp eyes, said nothing. She only placed a small object on the table. It was a human chocolate. Wrapper, old, crumpled, faded. The room went quiet. Where did you get that? The Zarn general asked. The human smiled. From a survivor on Cornine, he said it was a gift. From the Empress herself, the others leaned closer. What does it mean? Someone whispered. The human stood slowly. It means she's not doing this for power or revenge. She's doing it because someone showed her kindness once, long ago. The silence grew heavier. She's not interested in peace talks, the human added. She doesn't speak to leaders. She speaks to thee. Broken. On a desert world far away, a small group of children stood around a fire. Their clothes were torn, their bodies thin. Most of them were orphans from wars no one remembered anymore. A tall figure stood beside them. The fire lit her silver eyes. Her skin was smooth, purple, and marked with thin lines like faded scars. She wore no crown, no armor, just a dark cloak and a chain around her neck. At the end of the chain was a strange pendant. It was shaped from melted plastic, the wrapper of a human treat. One of the children, a young lizard boy, looked up at her. Who gave that to you? He asked. She looked down. Her voice was soft. A soldier, long ago. He gave it to me when he had nothing else. Why? She paused. Because I was hungry. Because I was alone. Because he could have ignored me. But he didn't. The children were silent. The girl looked at the stars above. He didn't know my name, but I remembered his face. What happened to him? The lizard boy asked. I don't know, she said quietly. But I'll find him. She turned back to the fire. And when I do, I'll make sure the galaxy knows his name. Back on Earth, far from the stars, Mason sat alone in a small room. He didn't talk much anymore. He didn't sleep well. The war had taken too much. He didn't know what had happened to that alien girl. He only hoped she had survived. Sometimes he dreamed of her, and in those dreams, she stood in front of stars, her eyes glowing silver. But when he woke up, the world was quiet again, still broken, still waiting. He thought he saved a child. Now, she commands the stars. The ship touched down on a quiet, dead moon. There were no cities, no guards, no weapons, only dust, silence, and an old stone temple standing alone near a cliff. Mason stepped out slowly. The wind here didn't blow. The sky above showed stars more clearly than anywhere else. He held nothing, no armor, no gun. Just a memory. At the top of the stone steps stood a figure tall, cloaked and still. She waited. He climbed slowly. His boots pressed into the stone. His heartbeat echoed in his chest. For years, he had lived in silence. For days, he had watched her face on screens. Now she was here, and he didn't know what to say. When he reached the top, the figure stepped forward. The Empress, her face was calm. Her silver eyes glowed softly in the dim light. Her skin, once dirty and bruised, now looked smooth, strong, marked with ancient patterns. Her cloak moved gently, as if responding to her emotions. Mason stared. She was not the little girl he remembered. She was powerful, commanding, radiant. But then she smiled, and in that smile, he saw her again. What the? Small, frightened child in the broken store. The one who had taken his last chocolate bar. "I wasn't sure you'd come," she said. Her voice was soft, like before, but there was strength in it now. Authority. Wisdom. Mason swallowed hard. "I didn't think I mattered anymore." "Do," she said. "You always did." They stood in silence for a moment. Then she removed the pendant from her neck. The candy wrapper now shaped into a beautiful metal emblem. Encased in crystal, she held it out. "You gave me this when I had nothing. When I was nobody, it saved me." Mason looked down at it. "It was just candy." "No," she said, "it was a choice. You could have ignored me, left me to die, but you didn't. That kindness changed me." I took a deep breath. "And now, you've changed the galaxy." The Empress turned and gestured toward the edge of the cliff. "Come, let me show you." They stood side by side, looking at the stars above and the ships floating in orbit, but these were not warships. They were ships of refugees, rebuilders, diplomats, survivors, all from worlds she had freed. "They follow you," Mason said quietly. "They follow the idea," she replied. "An idea you gave me." Mason looked down. "I'm just a soldier. I didn't plan any of this." "But that's the beauty of it," she said. "The galaxy fears weapons, but they don't understand kindness. They don't know what to do when someone gives instead of takes." She turned to him again. Her eyes were serious now. "I want you to speak with me. Stand with me. I'm preparing to face the Galactic Council. Let's bring peace. True peace. But your presence would mean everything." Mason stepped back slightly. "I'm not built for speeches. You don't have to speak," she said. "Just stand by me. Let them see the man who saved a nobody." He thought for a long moment, then he asked, "Why me? You could do it without me." She smiled again. "Because when they see you, they'll understand this is real. That one small act of kindness can shake empires." Later that night, Mason sat alone inside the temple. He looked at the stars above, thinking about everything she had said. He remembered the war, pain, the silence, and now somehow he had become the symbol of something far bigger than himself. He looked down at the pendant she had given back to him. The candy wrapper he once gave away, now changed into something beautiful, something that had survived. Just like her, he whispered to himself, "You're not a little girl anymore." But part of him was proud. Far above the moon, across hundreds of systems, news began to spread. The Empress had met with the human. People from every corner of the galaxy shared the story. Some celebrated. Others feared what it meant. In the shadows, enemy leaders began to plan. "She's uniting species," one Zarn commander said. "She must be stopped before she reaches the council." But it was too late. The movement was spreading, and the man who had once hidden from the world was now walking beside a leader who could change everything. Together, they would face the galaxy, and the galaxy would listen. They expected threats. She brought a memory, and the galaxy, began to tremble. The Council of Nine had never been afraid. They ruled from a giant space station shaped like a crown, hidden deep in neutral space. No weapons were allowed inside, no armies, only words. Words, they believed, could control the galaxy. But that belief was about to be tested. For the first time in its long history, the Council had invited someone with no government, no planet, no official rank, the Empress of the Forgotten, and she wasn't. Coming alone, she was bringing the human. The massive chamber of the Council was filled with silence. 9 giant chairs faced the center platform. Each chair belonged to one of the major species, the Yulari, the Zarn, the Kryn, the Sulin, and others. They sat tall and cold, staring down at the small landing pad where 2 figures now stood. One wore a black cloak, the other simple earth clothing. Mason stood beside her, hands by his sides. His heart beat hard in his chest. He wasn't a politician. He wasn't a speaker. But she had asked him to command. He had said yes. The Empress stepped forward. She said, "No titles, no threats, no demands. Just a story. I was born in a war zone," she began. "I don't remember my parents. I don't remember peace. All I remember is fire, hunger, and fear." The Council remained silent. "One day, while hiding from soldiers, I met a man," she continued. "He was human, dirty, wounded, tired. He had nothing left. But when he saw me, a small alien child, he gave me something." She reached up and touched the pendant around her neck. "This." Gasps echoed in the chamber. The human chocolate wrapper, shaped into a symbol. He could have ignored me. He could have kept running, but he stopped. He looked at me, and he gave. The Kren counselor leaned forward. "And for that, you now lead revolutions." "I lead memories," she replied. "I lead the forgotten. You ruled through fear, but you forgot what kindness can do." The Zarn ambassador growled. "And what do you want now?" The Empress paused. "Nothing, but change." She stepped aside, and for the first time, Mason walked forward. He looked up at the 9 rulers. His voice was rough, unsure. "I didn't mean to start anything," he said. "I was just a soldier trying to survive. I saw a hungry kid and gave her half a chocolate bar." He looked at the Empress. "And somehow, that was enough." He turned back to the Council. "So now I ask you, why do you fear her? She didn't bring war. He brought that. She brought peace to places you abandoned." The Sulin counselor whispered, "And if we refuse her vision," the Empress answered, "then the people will still follow it. With or without you." The council chamber grew colder. They had ruled for centuries, but now I could feel their grips slipping, outside the chamber, across the galaxy. The transmission was broadcast live. Billions watched. Slaves, workers, farmers, children in refugee camps. Soldiers in bunkers. Survivors on ruined worlds. They saw the Empress. They saw Mason. And they heard the truth. The movement spread faster than ever before. On one planet, guards lowered their weapons and joined a crowd chanting, "We remember." On another, statues of old warlords were torn down, replaced by simple stone carvings of a human hand, holding a piece of chocolate in the deep shadows of the galaxy. The old powers grew desperate. "She's breaking our control," a warlord shouted. "Her face is everywhere. Even our soldiers are leaving. What do we do?" One voice answered coldly. "We silence her and the human." Back aboard the Empress's personal ship, Mason sat in a quiet room, watching stars drift by like sparks drift by like sparks. In the dark, the door opened. She walked in, silent and graceful. "They heard us," she said. "They're afraid," he replied. She nodded. "Good. Fear leads to change." He turned to her. "Are you afraid?" She thought for a moment, then whispered, "Yes, but I won't stop." Mason smiled. "Then neither will I." They sat together, 2 people once lost in war now standing. At the center of a galaxy ready to wake up, but danger was near. They didn't know it yet, but the ones in the shadows were ready to strike. The galaxy watched in silence as one planet fell without a fight. Planet Hestara was not special. It was dry, dusty, and full of old mines. The Zarn Dominion used it for metal extraction and slave labor. The sky was always red, the sun always hot, and the people always afraid. The Zarn guards didn't care about the workers. They only cared about quotas. If a child slowed down, they were punished. If a miner fell sick, they were replaced. No one ever questioned the Zarn until now. It began with silence. One morning, guards woke up and found their cum towers shut off. Their weapons stopped working. The supply ships never arrived. Communications were dead. Then the people in the mines simply stopped working. They walked out. One by one, standing in the heat, silent, unarmed, unafraid. The guards shouted. They aimed their guns. Nothing happened. The weapons clicked but did not fire. The guards panicked. Some tried to run. Others tried to reboot their systems, but it was too late. From the cliffs above the mines, a tall figure stepped forward. In black eyes, glowing silver, behind her stood hundreds of shadowed figures, former slaves, escaped children, wounded soldiers, now loyal. She raised her hand. No words, no weapons. The Zarn guards dropped to their knees. Some cried. Others begged. She didn't speak to them. She turned to the miners. You are free. Just 2 words. But it was enough. They shouted, cheered, fell to their knees. Some wept. They had waited their whole lives for someone to say that. She did not stay long. She walked into the Zarn command tower. Alone 10 minutes later, the tower exploded when the Galactic Council heard. They didn't believe it. How could one person do this? The Ilari ambassador asked. They had help, said the Kren speaker. But who helped her? No known army. No ships, no weapons. The human ambassador leaned forward. Hope is the strongest weapon. On a nearby observation ship, a young pilot watched the events on Hestara unfold. He had hacked into old satellite feeds and recorded everything. He didn't know her name, but he zoomed in on the screen and paused the image. There she was, standing on the cliff, its wind blowing through her cloak. In her hand, a candy wrapper, shaped into a pendant. He posted the video to the Galactic net. It spread like fire. She didn't ask for attention, but she got it. Millions. Watched the video, billions. Some feared her, others followed her, and still, her name was unknown. They only called her the Empress of the Forgotten. In a small, hidden camp, the Empress sat by a fire again. Her cloak was dusty, her eyes tired. Beside her was an old alien woman, one of the miners from Hestara. She had deep scars and a missing arm. Why did you come for us? The old woman asked. The Empress stared into the fire. Because I was once like you. You were never a slave. I was worse, the Empress said softly. I was invisible. She pulled out the candy wrapper again and showed it to the woman. A human gave me this when I had nothing. He didn't know who I was. He didn't care what species I belonged to. He just saw someone who needed help. The old woman nodded slowly. You remembered? I remember everything, the Empress whispered. She stood and looked at the stars. Above, and now, the galaxy will remember him. Back on Earth, Mason's life was quiet. He still walked every morning, still drank cold coffee, still dreamed of fire and smoke. He didn't watch the galactic news, didn't care. But then one day, someone knocked on his door. A small delivery drone floated outside. It held a box. Inside the box was a datapad and a wrapper, the same brand he had given away so long ago. Mason stared at it. For a long time, then he turned on the datapad. It showed the video from Hestara. The one going viral? He saw her. Older now. Taller, stronger. But it was her, the little girl he once saved. Now saving others, his hands shook. His breath caught in his chest. He didn't know what to feel. Pride, fear, confusion. But deep inside, something old began to wake up. Something called purpose. in the shadows of the Galactic Council, secret plans. "We're being made. She must be stopped," the Zarn general growled. "She's just one," said another. "No," the human ambassador whispered. "She's not just one." They all turned to her. "She's the memory of every planet you broke. Every child you left behind. She's what happens when you forget, and they remember." The council chamber fell into silence. For the first time in years, they were afraid. He tried to forget, but she made sure the galaxy remembered. Mason sat in the small garden behind his house. The wind was gentle. Sky above Earth was clear, full of soft clouds. He sipped cold tea from a chipped cup. His back hurt, and his knees were sore. The war had left him with more pain than medals. He tried not to think about it, but the past never stayed quiet. The datapad lay on the table next to him. He hadn't turned it on again since he saw the video from Hestara the girl. The pendant, her voice, it was her. Older, stronger, still her. Mason closed his eyes. He remembered the broken store. The dusty vending machine. Her small silver eyes staring at him from the shadows. He had saved her once. Now, she was saving worlds, eh? Soft ding pulled him out of his thoughts. Another message. He didn't check it. Then came the sound of a car stopping outside. Boots on gravel. Voices and a knock on the door. Mason stood slowly, his joints complaining. He opened the door. Two people stood, their official-looking suits, serious faces. Behind them, a silent hover car. "Mr. Mason Cole?" the man asked. Mason nodded. "We need you to come with us." Now, Mason didn't move. "Why?" the woman next to the man answered. "Because the galaxy is watching, and you're in the center of it." The transport took him high above the clouds, past Earth's defense platforms, into orbit. Mason sat in silence, arms crossed. Across from him sat the same woman from before. She introduced herself as Commander Alara, Earth Intelligence. She stared at him with sharp eyes. "You don't understand what you've done." "I didn't do anything," Mason replied. "That was years ago. I gave a child some chocolate." Commander Alara leaned forward. "That child is now leading the fastest growing movement in galactic history. No government controls her, no army can stop her. But every world she frees, she speaks of you." Mason looked out the window. "She shouldn't." "Why not?" "Because I'm no hero." Alara was quiet for a moment. "Doesn't matter," she said. "You are." They brought him to a high-level meeting room aboard the UN's Titan, Earth's most advanced diplomatic ship. Ambassadors from 10 human colonies were already waiting. Screens around the room showed live feeds of protests, battles, and celebrations from across the galaxy, all connected to one name: the Empress. A hologram of the pendant appeared above the table. It spun, slowly, clearly made from a melted human. Candy wrapper. "Everywhere she goes," the lead ambassador said, "she tells one story. A wounded human gave her his last treat. No questions, no fear, just kindness." That act started a wave. Another ambassador leaned forward. "And that wave is turning into a flood." "She wants something," said a third. Mason finally spoke. "She never asked for anything." The room went quiet. "She's not trying to build an empire," Mason added. "She's trying to fix something." The lead ambassador looked at him. "Then why send you the wrapper? Why now?" Mason didn't answer, because deep inside, damned he already knew she was calling him far away, in deep space, on a moon not listed on any chart. The Empress stood before a mirror. She wore no crown. But behind her stood leaders from 5 newly liberated worlds, once enemies, now allies. She nodded to them. "Prepare the message." One of her aides asked, "Will the council listen?" "They won't have a choice," she said. "He's awake now." She touched the pendant around her neck. "He'll remember me. I remember him." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Now the galaxy will listen." Back aboard the UN's Titan, Mason stood alone in a quiet hallway. Outside the window, Earth looked peaceful, blue, and calm. He wasn't calm. He felt old, tired, unprepared, but part of him deep inside felt something else, a spark. He had lived in silence for so long. Now the galaxy was shouting his name. Could he face her again? Could he face himself? Behind him a voice spoke. Commander Alara, she's invited you to meet her. Mason turned. Where? Neutral space. One moon. No guards, no tricks. Looked down at the datapad again. At the image of her silver eyes, he took a deep breath. When do we leave? They planned for war, but the people remembered and chose something else. The message was clear. The Empress and the human had stood before the council, and the council had done nothing. They didn't agree, didn't reject. They only watched. But in the dark corners of space, the old rulers grew restless. The Zarn generals, the slave-trading barons, the last few warlords they wanted to strike. She's weakening everything, one Zarn commander growled. Our armies are splitting. Even our pilots chant her name. She must be removed, another hissed. Silence her. Silence the human. Let the galaxy forget again. And so, they began to prepare. A secret fleet was formed. Not under one flag, but many. Hidden ships, old weapons, silent assassins. They called it Project Black. Silence, their goal was simple. Destroy the Empress and make it look like an accident. No one would ever know. The Empress's ship moved quietly through neutral space. She sat alone in the garden room, a peaceful place filled with glowing plants from dozens of rescued worlds. But peace was never safe for long. Mason entered the room. He had seen the reports. They're coming, he said. She nodded. I know. Not going to run? No, she said simply. They expect me to fight. Mason tilted his head. So what will you do? I'll show them something they've forgotten. The Black Silence fleet entered orbit around Avon Prime, a small planet recently freed by the Empress's forces. It was a poor world, no real defenses, no fleet. The commanders sent a single message: turn over the Empress, or burn. But no one responded. Instead, thousands of people, farmers, miners, refugees, walked into the open fields and stood silently, unarmed, unmoving. The warships above waited, confused. One Zarn captain growled, "They're mocking us." But then the people began to hold up something small. It wasn't a weapon, wasn't a flag. It was a wrapper. Old, crumpled. Some fake, some real. Candy wrappers of all kinds. The message was clear. We remember her. The commanders panicked. They tried to order the attack. But something strange happened. Their ships didn't fire. Some crews refused. Some left their posts. On 5 ships, the crew turned on their own officers and locked them in command rooms. We won't kill the people, they said. Not again. The fleet began to fall apart without a single shot fired. The Empress stood on the surface and looked up at the sky. Watching it all happen, Mason stood beside her. You planned this, he asked. No, she said softly. I just believed it was possible. News of the failed attack spread fast. The galaxy had watched the skies, waiting for war. But war never came. Instead, the story became something else. They called it the war that never happened. And it changed everything, because for the first time in galactic history, people's memory, a simple story of kindness, had stopped a battle before it began. Even on Earth, people began to talk. She had no army, yet worlds followed her. She had no throne, yet she ruled minds. And standing beside her, a man who once gave away a treat during war. Now, he was part of a movement that made soldiers lay down their weapons. Inside a quiet room aboard the Empress's ship, Mason looked out the window. He thought about the fear, the silence, a war. Thought about how he once felt like nothing. And now, he looked down at the pendant in his hand. He remembered the day he gave it away. A hungry girl, broken city, a half bar of chocolate. He had no idea that moment would echo through the stars. Behind him, the Empress entered quietly. They'll come again, she said. I know. They'll try harder next time. Mason looked at her. Then we'll Be ready, she smiled. Not because they were safe, but because they were not afraid. And neither was the galaxy. Because now, the people had chosen to remember, and memory was stronger than fear. She ruled stars. She still asked the human what he wanted. Peace at last had begun to spread. The Zarn dominion collapsed. Slave fleets were broken apart. Refugee planets finally opened their skies to sunlight, without fear of warships above and across the galaxy. One name was spoken, not with fear, but with hope. The Empress, she didn't sit on a throne. She didn't demand tribute. She simply kept moving from world to world, helping rebuild what had been lost. But there was one task left unfinished. A. Promised to keep to the man who gave her everything when he had nothing. 2. Mason. They met again in the garden room, aboard her ship. The Empress stood among glowing flowers that had once grown only on dead planets. Now, they bloomed like stars. She looked at him with the same silver eyes he remembered from long ago. I've given peace to many, she said softly. But I never asked you what you wanted. Mason chuckled. I didn't do anything. She stepped closer. You gave me life. He looked down. It was just a candy bar. No, she said gently. It was light in the dark. She reached into her cloak and pulled out a crystal box. Inside was something simple. A chocolate bar wrapped. Clean, untouched. It's the last one in this part of the galaxy, she said with a smile. Mason laughed a real laugh the first. In a long time? You kept it all this time? She nodded. I wanted to give it back when the time was right. He took the box, but his smile slowly faded. You've rebuilt worlds, he said. You've made history. Why are you still thinking about me? Because the galaxy remembers pain? But I wanted it to remember kindness. She sat beside him. Mason, I can give you anything. A planet, a title, a fleet. Name it. He thought quietly for a long time. Then he looked at her and said, I don't want any of that. She blinked. Then what do you want? I want a small house, a quiet place, maybe a garden. It's a vending machine. She laughed. You're serious? He nodded. Make sure it works this time. Tears touched the corners of her eyes. Happy tears, not sorrow. You gave me freedom, she said. And you still choose simplicity. That's the gift, he said quietly. Peace should feel small sometimes. Years passed. The Empress continued her mission, quietly, gently. No statues were built of her. No great banners. Just stories told in low voices around campfires and children's beds, and on a quiet planet at the edge of a peaceful system, a small house stood. It had a garden, it had a dog, and next to the front door, there was a vending machine, fully stocked always. Working inside the house, an old man sat with a cup of tea. Mason, his hair now white, his back slower, but his heart full. He looked out at the stars every night. Sometimes saw a ship pass far above. He always smiled because he knew she was still out there watching, helping, remembering. One day after Mason passed peacefully in his sleep, the Empress returned to the small house. She stood there in silence, hand pressed against the vending machine. No words, just memory. She opened the door, walked through the garden, and placed something on his table. A small crystal statue. Inside it, a perfect copy of the candy wrapper, shaped into a flame. Below it, carved in simple words, he gave without asking. She remembered forever. Years later, children across the galaxy asked about the legend. Who was the Empress? Why did she never take power for herself? And always, the story ended the same way, with a quiet human soldier, and a single act of kindness, they say. The statue still stands in the galactic peace dome, right in the center, where leaders meet. Not of a king, not of a general, but of a tired man. It's offering a chocolate bar to a child, and that moment shaped the stars.